I don't know. I don't want to do this. Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. Welcome back to yet another trek, the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. We are on Volume 12, Chapter 8. Yes, I don't really know how this is going to go. This might actually be a short Mushoku Mondays. Yes, I have read Chapter 9, a little bit past it, and yes, we're going to get into a pretty tough subject on the side of, yes, it being very personal. Whenever something like this kind of comes up, it's a little hard to talk about. I'm mixed on my perspective and how I want to kind of handle it personally, but with all that said, as per usual, I'm going to keep to the status quo, doing analysis on the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation series, and we'll see where things go. It might get to a point where this is going to be a short episode, but we'll see, as always, as it goes along. But yeah, as per usual, thank you everybody that's dropped by for the premiere, everybody that's in the chat. Hey chat, I'm sure they're going nuts right now. Everybody that supports the channel, it means so much to me. Everybody that's a Patreon supporter, everybody that is members of the channel itself, all the super thanks, all that kind of stuff, super chats, it all means so much to me. It's your guys' support that keeps us going, despite the fact that it might not keep going. Not that I'm going to stop this series, just that this one particular is going to be a little difficult to get through. But yeah, with all that said, I guess let's just jump right into it. I don't think Chapter 8 is going to take very long because it's just mostly fighting, and that stuff is, you just kind of breeze through it, and not really too much to analyze. There is some very deep topics at the end of Chapter 8, which is, I think, is going to be really a nugget of goodness there for sure. But, and yes, it kind of sucks. This is one of those kind of difficulties in deciding exactly how much I read before I do a Mushoku Mondays, and really trying to get enough content per Mushoku Mondays. I mean, it kind of makes me want to just do chapter, and just kind of release them over the week, but it's the format we're going with. It's working really well. I like to keep consistent, and this is working, so it is what it is. But yes, without further ado, let's just jump right into it with Chapter 8, The Guardian of the Teleportation Labyrinth. All the circles up until this point were a pale light. This one was red. A color that signified danger. Paul muttered, "It's here, beyond this point." He was speaking on intuition, but what was it? Dennis' prison or the Guardian? Either way, he felt confident that this was the final part of the labyrinth. At this point, Geese inquired Paul if he wanted to turn back now or continue on. They were still good on supplies, so it was up to him. Paul chose to play it safe and head back to Ripon. Upon arriving at Ripon, they all gathered in order to have a meeting. I'm just joking. I know it's going to be really bad to throw jokes in this, but I'm still going to try to have fun with this Mushoku Mondays. I'm not going to be depressed the whole time. The best way to overcome that is joy. But no, Geese inquired if Paul wanted to turn back or not. They had plenty of supplies, plus they had plenty of time resting as well, because everybody was waiting to figure out what to do there. So they were technically still good. No, let's keep going. Everyone, check your gear. Upon hearing Paul's decision, everybody plopped on the floor and began examining their equipment. Come on, Rudy, you too. Rudy took a seat and extracted his things, taking stock on what all they had. He wasn't carrying much though, just a couple scrolls. Do you want a couple of my scrolls? Roxy had hidden a few things in her bag just in case a need arose. The scrolls were for advanced tier magic. She could dish out spells really quickly due to her shortening incantations, but advanced tier required lengthy chanting. These were sort of like a hidden trump card for her. If there was a difficult situation or she didn't have enough time, she could bust these out. Well, that was really, really cool. It's kind of another hidden thing that sort of makes it really cool to have these scrolls. In a lot of RPGs that I've played, they're usually typically things that you can use despite not being an actual caster. It's sort of like the caster applied it to the scroll itself, like it's already casted, it's just like stored, and then you could use it. Though like with the lamplight, it seems like these things still do take mana. That might be a good idea. Can I have a few of your healing ones then? Certainly. Yes, we all know that Ruius can do voiceless casting, but he can't do it for healing. So this is actually a good thing to have in case, I like how he kind of puts it out. Yeah, in case my throat or lungs got crushed again. Like, they're about to face a really powerful opponent, and so I guess the thing that immediately jumps in his mind is, yeah, I guess I technically could have another Orsted situation and just completely be disabled. Roxy passed them over, and he tucked them into his robe. If he didn't use them, he could just return them. Though he did wonder if he could have Nanahoshi or Cliff recreate them. Yes, he thought that it was forbidden to do that without permission, but maybe he wouldn't get caught if he used it for personal use. Yes, technically, how would they know? You're not in trouble unless you get caught. But no, that's actually something surprising that Rudius hasn't done yet. Since he can't do voiceless casting for healing, why doesn't he carry scrolls? Yes, the assumption is that these are very rare and very, very expensive, so that's probably why he's never had them. And like, you go to the store and go, hey, I need like 5 of those healing scrolls. What like he's kind of pointing out here, I kind of would want to make some copies of these. He's never really had them. I have no idea what kind of guardian we'll face, but we have plenty of firepower. I'll work as hard as I can to support you so you don't have to use any of those scrolls. Please do. I can be a bit of a coward at times, so please help me out if I need it. Of course, you can count on me. Roxy knocked her fist on her tiny chest. It was reassuring to hear. Rudius, Roxy. Eloise tossed a marble-sized rock, one of the numerous magically imbued crystals she carried. If you run out of mana, use those. Are you sure? I'm just lending them to you, so if you don't use them, you can give them back later. Oh, sure, got it. Again, she's got like a storehouse of these things in her pocket. But no, these are actually cool. These are technically like mana potions. It wasn't uncommon for magicians to run out of mana exploring a labyrinth. That's why they normally cleared enemies, retreated, rested, and then pressed on. However, with a guardian, Rudius heard that sometimes you couldn't run. Sometimes you'd find yourself locked inside an arena type area, unable to leave until he was defeated. The circle looked like a two-way circle, but perhaps it was a one-way. They needed a way to replenish their mana, if so. Yeah, the moment he said this, my mind thought, oh, flag right here. I know they're going to step on this teleporter and it's going to literally be like on the ceiling or something, so it drops them down to the ground and they can't get back up to it or something. Like something's going to make this a one-way. It looks like a two-way, but it's going to be a one-way in a sense. But no, I like this emphasis here that, yeah, I have a massive mana pool, but we're going into a situation where we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how much mana I'm going to have to use. We don't know how much HP this thing has. What if you go in there and there's literally a behemoth that you were talking about before that has this massive HP bar? What if you have to pummel it with so much mana? Of course, we find out even a worse scenario in a minute, but it still makes sense. You have to have some way of assuring your victory, no matter what it is. No matter how expensive these things are, Eloise is probably thinking that. We could die, so you probably need to hold on to this. If you don't use it, you can give it back. But for now, at least use this if you need it. And yes, technically to that note, this thing in her pocket, this gem, is her own life. If she gives this to Roxy or Rudius and she needs healing later, they're going to save her life with it. Everyone's expressions were pulled tight as Paul called them to their feet. Rudius needed to put his game face on. Paul turned to Rudius and called his name. What is it? I feel bad for saying this to you in a time like this, but there it is. A death flag. I hate that. Then please don't say it. Okay. Paul looked disheartened, but he couldn't have him saying anything important before the final battle. It's gonna suck this whole time. Anything he had to say, they could say it once they could return home. Okay, let's go in. They exchanged glances before hopping onto the circle. They warped into a vast area, oblong-shaped and the size of a baseball field. Thick pillars at every corner and a ceiling so high you had to bend backwards in order to see it. The floor covered in tiles and engraved with complex patterns. It was majestic. A monster was located in the depths of the structure. An enormous one, approximately the size of 2 red worms. Rudius could glimpse the twinkle of its emerald green scales, as well as its short, stout body and numerous heads that grew out from it. A hydra? Seriously? I never seen one of them before. This jogged Rudius' memory. An enormous dragon with 9 heads. I was really kind of wondering what this guardian was going to end up being. I just assumed it was going to be maybe a minotaur or something like that. Always got to go with the minotaur, but yeah, hydra was, I think, the last thing I was really thinking about. Now, again, technically with the anime adaptation, when they did show that brief shot of where Kishiriko was seeing Zenith, my assumption that at that time was that this was going to be a dragon. It looked like something was of a dragon there in that brief shot that we got. So, there you go. There she is. Paul and Rudius spotted what the Hydra was protecting. A single, magically imbued crystal. One of magnificent size, green in color, spikes fanning outward. It was completely unlike the marble-sized ones that Eloise carried. The size was irrelevant, though. More importantly, was what was trapped inside. His mother. Finally. Finally, they spot her. And yes, kind of my heaviest prediction was that she was going to be in sort of a suspended state. And this would make sense inside of a crystal. Now, the struggle that I have right now is a little, I don't know, it might not be a continuity issue. This might be one of those things that later on it's explained and it makes sense. What did Geese say? Geese got the information that Zenith was there. A party of adventurers went down in the labyrinth and they seen what looked like Zenith. Again, what did we just do? Rudius just got to this chamber. They had to blast this open and get down there to arrive at this Hydra where Zenith's at. Now, it could make sense if you think about this party that is talking to Geese, which they mentioned later on the idea that Rudius kind of wants to press him on this, but doesn't want to do it right now. The only explanation here is that whoever talked to Geese was somebody that went down there, opened it physically, opened this door physically to get down to where the Hydra was at. And then they closed it back up when they left. Like, they got there and they said, we ain't beating this thing, get the hell out of here. And they left. Now, the other aspect that's kind of difficult is we've yet to find out, where is this other party? They said that they went back down there, and they've never heard of him since. So what is the deal here? The other sort of side crazy theory I have is that Geese isn't telling the whole story here. There's a possibility that Geese figured this out not by some other party telling him about where she's at, but that he may have some way of knowing where she's at. Some odd other, maybe an informant that is not normal, like an informant that is able to see where this is at. Maybe whatever information he had was just too crazy for him to explain to everybody and then believe him. Some other means besides some adventurers spotted Zenith that he found out. And I'm certain that we're probably going to find out what that is because, again, in a little bit, Ruiz is going to be like, wait, did Geese know that she was in a crystal? Why did he not say anything? I need to press him on how he knows this, but I don't want to do it now. The other theory I have is that Zenith wasn't always down there. Yeah, you would assume that she was there because this is this massive crystal that this thing is protecting, but there's a possibility that she may have been somewhere else in the labyrinth and it was taken down there. Maybe the Hydra does leave its quarters and grabbed her and brought her down there, or maybe because of the teleportation things, it was teleporting around in the labyrinth. That's the only other theory I can have. But hopefully, again, this is something that can be explained. One, did this party actually make it down there? Did they physically open that trap and reclose it so they can get to the stairs? Two, if that's not true, how did Geese know? And who's his informant? And three, where's this party at? If it's even existing. A lot of questions. Hopefully eventually get them answered. Zenith! Paul shrieked. Rudius was confused. Why? How did this happen? How did she get inside the crystal? Before he could say anything, Paul readied his sword and charged forward. The Hydra lifted its necks. Damn you, moron, don't rush out there! Elise clicked her tongue and sprinted after him. Talhan went waddling behind her. Elise couldn't catch up to him. I'll cover you, Roxy shouted. Rias regained his senses and stretched his staff forward. They had to first defeat their opponent. He was going to take it down in one hit, charging his stone cannon to the same potency as what sent a Demon King sprawling. I like this whole thing. Well, I'm massively OP. Here's I'm an OP main character. Here we go. Just one shot it, right? Right? You knew it wasn't going to be that easy. You knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Roxy casted an ice smash, sending a block of ice past Paul towards the Hydra. A jarring sound, like nails on glass, split through the air. Roxy was shocked as the Hydra was unscathed. Was it resistant to ice? As Paul arrived at the creature, Rudius unleashed his stone cannon. Once again, an ear-splitting noise. Was it deflected? It didn't evade. It had to have hit, dead on. Yet the Hydra stood there as if noticing nothing, not a scratch. And here's this whole thing that Rudius was talking about before. I have this one thing that I keep doing. Stone cannon, quagmire, stone cannon, quagmire. I'm not doing anything else. I have nothing to challenge myself to learn anything else. Nothing is difficult to me. Here it is. Here's the wake-up call. You should have been trying something else. Now, again, technically, this thing, as we'll find out, seemingly is just absorbing all these spells. It's not really doing anything. The Hydra moved its head like a snake, lashing out at Paul. Paul was sharp and precise as he evaded, only moving as required. Again, it's kind of like that whole fight between Orsted and Reserved, kind of emphasizing that idea of not doing broad movements, but only enough. Only enough. It kind of instills that idea of just the pure experience that Paul has. In the next moment, the Serpentine's head were dancing in the air. Paul's left sword pierced through it. His speed was astonishing. For a moment, Paul's body blurred. He was so fast that Rudius's eye of foresight couldn't track him. Blood came bursting from one of the other Hydra's necks. Again, his left sword sliced its flesh. Through the blade's length, it couldn't behead it. So Paul flipped his body, taking advantage of the centrifugal force, to cut once more. It's like you just stab. And it's kind of turned into, will it blend? Get the commercial, will it blend? One of the serpent's wilting necks came crashing down. In an instant, it had lost 2 of them. Paul wrecking this thing. As the remaining surrounded Paul, Annalise rushed in with her shield and weapon, sending a shockwave through the air. But again, that sound, that piercing sound, the Hydra continued at Paul as if it didn't even notice her attack. For this reason, Roxy casted Flash Flood to sweep Paul out of the Hydra's range. Annalise stepped forward to cover him. Talhan stopped behind them and started his own incantation. They had their formation, but what were they supposed to do? His and Roxy's magic was deflected. Fire? Wind? They may get the others caught up in it, though. Talhan unleashed an earth pillar that plummeted down on the Hydra. Again, that sound. The rock shattered into dust and disappeared. That piercing sound that nullified magic. Crap, what are they supposed to do? Keep trying? Retreat? Rudy, look, it's healing. Meat and muscle was knitting back together. The other neck soon followed. At this point, Roxy called for retreat, but it didn't seem to reach Paul. Yeah, this is that point where you're going, okay, we need to, if they can retreat, this is a point to retreat. Now, granted, if it was me, the moment I got there, it'd be okay, let's make sure that this teleporter works before we try anything. But yeah, the moment you see something is going wrong, get out of there. Like, just go. Paul was whooping out fierce battle cries as he single-mindedly slashed his sword at the Hydra. It was even putting Annalise in danger. He's going berserk mode. He's like not even thinking about others around him. Just that his wife is right there. I can't blame him. I'm not blaming him at all. Talhan called out to Geese, who rushed forward and flung something at the Hydra. An explosion rippled, and a dense smoke rolled out from the Hydra. Geese was yelling out something as he looped his arms around Paul, pulling him from behind, but he couldn't hold him. Then Annalise came over and bonked Paul over the head with her shield. At this point, Geese let go, and then said something that Rudius couldn't catch, before Paul hustled back towards Rudius. Annalise called out for Rudius to snap him out of it before his body started moving. He conjured a white mist between them and the Hydra. He could hear it rustling around, but it seemed like it was too slow. At this point, Roxy called for Rudius to retreat, and everyone jumped onto the teleportation circle. Everyone made it safely to the other side. Oof. I kind of already mentioned it, but yeah. Good call by Roxy. I like the emphasis on the idea that, yes, Paul is in berserk mode. He's not listening to anybody right now. He is, my wife's right there. I have to save her. Even though she's been there for years, it doesn't matter. I need to get her out of there. She's right here. And that's the thing. It's like, I just said that, but now it kind of hits me. That's the point. It has been years. He's like, I have to get her out of here because I've been waiting this long for this moment. He's been craving this moment to see his wife again. So the time itself is an aspect of, you can wait a couple more minutes, but also an aspect of, I've been waiting long enough. But I think Roxy made the right call. The moment you've seen something as of error, get out of there. Especially when literally, technically 2.5 of your members, of 5 members, is not doing anything, not able to do much. Yes, Roxy's still able to heal. Rudius is still able to heal. They could go full heal melee, but they're still losing so much of their power. Something isn't right. Yes, technically, the regenerating part is the big sign of get the hell out of there. Like, this ain't working. But I would have stopped the moment something wasn't right. Again, this isn't a game. These are their lives at stake here. But no, I loved how quickly just calls to Geese. He knows. Like, Geese doesn't really do anything. He is always on standby. He is not a fighter. He is pretty much a guide. He is a gatherer. And he's a strategist. And yes, as they'll sort of talk about in a minute, he is also the one that when things go south, he's the one that gets out of there. He's the one that goes back and tells everybody. Otherwise, nobody will really know besides, yeah, technically the waiting party out there will eventually realize it. But similar to the case with Roxy, they may never know. What if they get stuck down here for an entire month? They're still alive, but the party doesn't know. But yeah, he's like instantly out there. I really wish we could eventually find out what Geese said to Paul. He yells at 2 things out to him. I'm assuming it's, dude, you need to come back. We're not going anywhere. We just got to get out of here for right now. We need to discuss this. You're going crazy. Stop. You are going to hurt everybody else. You're not thinking straight. Calm that down. Calm the nyas down. That would be my assumption, but yeah. Again, I'm starting to get I'm starting to build a lot of question marks around Geese right now, so don't even get me started. I've already kind of gotten to it quite a bit earlier, but I'm starting to have question marks around Geese. I'm going to start questioning Geese with everything now. But yeah, that was kind of my assumption when they seen the Hydra, because that's typically an aspect of the Hydra. And it's so interesting here in a minute, we'll get into it, this idea of why does it seem like everything sort of plays into the tropes? It's not that it's a bad thing, but it's like, why does this world play into the same rules as fictitious things from our world? It's sort of a very curious question, which is probably a massive later story bit that we'll get into in 15 chapters. I don't need to know, chat. Shut up. Don't even, well, you'll see. I don't even need those. But yes, everyone made it safely to the other side. Annalise was bleeding from a wound in her shoulder. A sizable chunk was taken out of her. Reese didn't even see her take a hit, but apparently its outer shell was razor sharp. Basic tear healing sufficed. In his previous world, it would have required dozens of stitches. Magic in this world was convenient. Not convenient enough. Not convenient enough. Annalise thanked him before Paul plopped himself down in front of the magic circle. Fixing his gaze on it, murderous intent oozed from him like a poisonous mist. Father, that was Zenith. I'm sure of it. Paul hadn't even registered Annalise's injury. But she was a tank, so you could say that her injury was a part of the job. Even so, he's kind of emphasizing here, Paul's not even getting that somebody got hurt. He's just, I gotta get back in there. He's like literally, he's got his target. Let me back to the target. When are we gonna go back? Everybody's like getting recuperated and they're gonna eventually start to figure out what they're gonna do. He's just like, I gotta go back. I gotta go back. I gotta go back. Please, calm down a bit. Yeah, that was my bad. I'm fine now. He was calm, but not cool-headed. He was right though. It was Zenith. But why was she encased in there? No, the reason didn't matter. There was many potential explanations. Maybe the displacement warped her inside of it. That was my theory. It was rare, but not impossible. Why he means rare here, again, to kind of emphasize before, when he was looking into the displacement incident itself and teleportation and all that kind of stuff, it was emphasizing this idea that typically when you got teleported, like a teleportation like that, mana could only take you somewhere where like the mana flowed, and it wasn't often that it would go inside of objects. And this is sort of emphasized with the book itself. When it was talking about random warps, it was emphasizing the idea that you couldn't just like teleport into a wall, which you would think would be very common. If this circle right here, you stepped on it, it randomly teleported to you to somewhere in this XYZ axis, there's a lot more chance that you're going to end up in a wall than on an actual path. One of these small, narrow paths. But yeah, they were hinting at the idea that it was a possibility. Like it could actually happen. And I mean, with the whole teleportation that they did to get here from the northern region, what did it look like? It looked like they were sucked into the portal itself. So it sort of makes sense. But again, it could be them being drawn into the circle and then transported. Not necessarily going into the floor. But Geese said that they were, here's where it goes. Here's where it goes. Here's where it starts. But Geese said she was found by adventurers. The words he used was captured. Does that mean Geese knew the condition she was in? No, impossible. While he wanted to, it wouldn't do any good to interrogate him about the framing of information here. That could be for later, after this was over. Again, he knows that if he confronts Geese right now, especially with Paul this worked up, this ain't gonna be good. Like if he turns to Geese and says, wait, did you know that she was in there? Did they say anything about that? Paul's probably gonna flip out too. But no, there's another point right there that I completely didn't get into earlier. He specifically used the word captured. Again, yes, he was talking about, wait, captured? Like the labyrinth captured her or a monster did? What? It sort of indicates that, yeah, maybe the possibility this group seen her and she wasn't encased in anything, but then was brought to there, trapped by the monsters and brought there. Or maybe, again, she was inside of a gym on the upper floors and the monsters were taking her down there at the time. There's so many possibilities. But yeah, I think my main theory is the idea that somebody got down there and seen her. Or Geese got information from somebody else that wasn't an adventurer, that didn't go down there. Kind of like a Kishirika situation. Somebody that could see where she's at. Rudius spoke up. I wonder if she's still alive in there. Paul leaped to his feet and grabbed Rudius by the collar. What's that? It doesn't matter if she's alive or not. You're right. He had a point. That was inappropriate for him to say. Her survival was abysmal to begin with. Rudius considered the possibility of not finding a body at all. Maybe just a memento left behind. Finding her this way was far better than what they could have hoped for. Enough of the fighting, Geese snapped. Paul leaned his face towards Rudius, as if to intimidate him. Rudy, she's there. Zenith is there. Your mother. How can you be so calm? You would prefer me to panic? How would me losing my composure solve anything? That's not what I'm talking about. Rudius knew what he meant. He was being too cool-headed. His attitude wasn't appropriate for a child who found his mother after 6 years. Holy crap. Where do we start? I sometimes kind of hate this. I almost wish that the Refugien would kind of spread this stuff out here, but dang, where do I start with this little bit? I'm going to start with Paul. This is obviously something that has been building in Paul's head ever since Rudius first was acting weird as an infant. This is something that has been building up, I think, for a long time for Paul. Paul has never seen his son as normal. He's always seen that there's something off about his child. He's matured too quickly. He talks weird. Everybody sees that. Rudius talks weird. They don't know that he is an isekai. He's, from his birth, was technically a middle-aged man. And I think this is something that has been building up in his mind. And I think the big, massive point of this whole thing for Paul was the day that Rudius said, even Sylphie. From that point on, I think this has been building in Paul's head the entire time. Why did he ask about Sylphie? Why not his own mother? That's where it started, I think. And I think this is that point which it finally snaps. Okay, I'm sick of this. Why doesn't this kid see family? Why doesn't he see me as a father? I think he does now. Again, this is that whole aspect of the displacement incident showed Rudius what he lost. And eventually, through the turmoil between him and his father, eventually he learned to care for his father. To have some semblance of seeing him as something of a father. I still don't think he fully sees him as a father. He calls him father. He doesn't, of course, see him as my dad. It's more of the fact that he is my parental figure here, and he respects him in certain ways and sees that he is strong. But that's much more than what Paul sees Rudius is seeing in Zenith. And even so more what Rudius sees in Zenith. He knows Rudius doesn't see her as a mother. Knows she doesn't feel for her. Knows that he doesn't miss her. Knows that he's not concerned for her. It's almost like that aspect that even though Paul was writing to Rudius saying, don't worry about it. I'll find mother. You just take care of things up there. I'm going to send your sisters up to you. Just don't worry about it. We'll handle it. I think even then he's thinking to himself, why isn't he helping? Like, why isn't he concerned? Why isn't his heart broken? Why isn't he feeling what I'm feeling right now? Cool. And it blows up right here, I think. I really do feel like right here, it blows up out of him. Why aren't you upset? Son, I've been thinking this in my mind this whole time, but why don't you ever feel for your mother? What are you? Who are you? It's always been such an interesting thing that this series has really done, is explore the mindset of somebody who's almost detached from his parents in this new world. Every other isekai, it's literally, oh, I'm massively OP, leaving home now, and the family's like, okay, bye. Never about family. It's so rarely about family. Refugien knows how to write family. Even as broken as this story is in regards to how a family works. It's so good. It's so good. But yeah, Rudius right here. I don't really need to get into him at this part. It's literally going to start talking about it, so we can get into it now. But yeah, Rudius knew what he meant. He was being too cool-headed. His attitude wasn't appropriate for a child who found his mother after 6 years. But, well, he hadn't had much contact with Zenith since he was a child. It's partly Paul's fault. I'm surprised he didn't bring that up, but I don't think he really wanted to feed it. He didn't have a strong sense of her being his mother. If anything, she was more like a person that just happened to live with them. After all, he left his house when he was 7 years old. Hadn't seen her in almost 10 years. More than half his life he spent away from her. So maybe it wasn't entirely Rudius' fault for having a lukewarm reaction. It's a good point. 7 years. Yes, Zenith was taking care of him for that 7 years, but it wasn't as if he had time to connect. Again, having this long life before this life, where he was so disconnected from the world itself, and had so years of experience, and now suddenly, it's almost like anybody watching this. If you were a 30-something-year-old, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, this lady walks into your house and says, "Hi, I'm your new mother. I'm going to take good care of you." And she does a great job. She's going around, she's doing the cleaning, she's taking care of you, she's cooking you food, she listens to you whenever you have problems. Can you say that 7 years later, she disappears for 10 years, would you really be like, holy crap, there's mom again? I think for most people, yeah, you would probably see them as like a good friend, but as a mother, it's entirely different. I have a lot of like mother figures that I've had in my life. I also have father figures, especially with the fact that I've lost my father. These people that kind of stepped in and said, hey, if you need anything, I'll take care of you. Like these people turned into almost like not replacement fathers, but like just a father figure that I can rely on to sort of be in that place. It's a very good and comforting thing to have. And even then, I don't see them as my dad. My dad was so much different. It was so much more of a bond. And Ruius is completely disconnected from that. He's not Norn. I'm going to blab on and on. We got to keep going. It's like I said, these chapters. For now, let's just get on the same page about our current predicament. Huh? Ruius ignored Paul's bluster and began speaking matter-of-factly. Our magic didn't work on that guardian. It has an incredible ability to regenerate, and its offensive strength is so overwhelming that it broke past Miss Ellen Lace's defense just by brushing up against her. Then there's my mother, who is trapped inside a crystal. Frankly speaking, we don't know if she's alive or not. Yeah. Off. Already know that. I'm saying that's not the attitude to have when we finally found her. I told you, knock it off. You could have squabbled about that back at the inn. Geese forcefully peeled Paul off of Ruius. Damn it, enough of this. Paul spat and plunked down on the floor. Paul understood the situation already. He didn't need Ruius to spell it out for him. It was Ruius' attitude that he couldn't stand. Yeah, pretty much. That's the core of it. And yes, technically, I think it's a lot of to do with the fact that Paul right now is extremely worked up. And again, like I said, I think it's the combination of him being worked up about Zenith being right there. He finally sees her. He can't get her. He's getting angry about that. And then out of nowhere, Ruius is being calm. And like I said, having that in the back, what I think is in the back of his head this entire time, finally clicks. Why aren't you angry? Why are you never upset about mom? Pretty much. Ruius understood he was being a bit unemotional. But what did Paul want him to do? Yeah, I see both sides of this. Like, you can't, like, do you want him to forcefully cry? Ruius, and it sucks because Paul doesn't know what the situation of Ruius is. So he doesn't understand why Ruius is so disconnected. But at the same time, you can't blame Ruius for being disconnected. It just hasn't clicked for him yet. Now, for everybody that is a fan of Mushoku Tensei that has any taste whatsoever, they're going to be upset. They would be upset if they were in Ruius' shoes because Zenith's hot. Zenith's best mom. Of course we'd be upset. Ruius doesn't get it. All right, enough with the fighting. Now let's discuss. As they slowly gathered, Paul and Ruius taking their time, Roxy looked a bit flustered as she glanced at the two of them. It seemed Ruius had worried her. I'm fine. Are you sure? It wasn't the first time this happened between them. Once this was over, Paul would come to his senses. Ruius figured that eventually he would feel something too once Zenith was safe, and he could hear her voice. That's right. It had to be true. Things had just gotten a little off kilter, that's all. Roxy cleared her throat. As for Zenith being crystallized, I think there's something that we can do about that. She sounded a little bit more cheerful than usual. Really? Paul looked relieved. Yes, I've heard of occasional tales of powerful magical items encased within magic crystals. Once we defeat the Guardian, the crystal will liquefy and we'll be able to get her out. Or at least, so the stories say. Reese hadn't heard of anything like that before. But he was sure that Roxy wouldn't make this up. Ellen Lace followed up. Yes, I know what you're talking about. I know of one other person who was once like Zenith is right now. And they're still alive. Reese figured that was a lie. He has no faith in Ellen Lace. That's so mean. But no, Reese figured that was a lie. Ellen Lace was the kind to smoothly spin a tale in these situations. He couldn't blame her. She was trying to ease the tension. But it didn't mean that Zenith would be fine. Not that he needed to say anything. Everyone knew that already. They know Ellen Lace, I think. That was one of those funny things, like, as I was reading that, I'm like, yeah, but I think they knew that too. Like, they know what type of person Ellen Lace is. And I think they would probably know, in a situation like this, if she was telling the truth, more than Ruius would. Again, they were at a party with her. And this is like one of those matter-of-fact statements about how things work, life or death situation in a dungeon. I think that they would have probably had more conversation with Ellen Lace about this stuff than even Ruius. So I'm really curious as to what they think Ellen Lace is saying there. Yeah, there's a side of me that feels like Ellen Lace loves backing up Roxy. Again, they traveled together a lot. And it seems like we've already had, like, what, 2 or 3 situations where Ellen Lace always backs up Roxy. She always supports her. Again, that kind of goes to that whole mindset that we kind of talked about in, what was it, Volume 7, or late in Volume 7, when Rudius first met Elise. There was this idea that the mindset was that she was going around sleeping with all these men, but she actually didn't look down upon other women. She actually supported and helped them and gave them advice. She gave Roxy advice. She's a big sister type. That's literally what it comes down to. Elise is big sis type, which I love. So yeah, it would make sense that she would follow up Roxy to sort of support her statement there. And yes, it also makes sense that Elise is very good at calming people down and saying things to sort of smooth out situations, so she could have made something up. But I think Rudius isn't giving her enough credit. I seem to want to think that at some point we're going to probably find out there's somebody that Elise knows, or we're going to meet somebody that knew Elise that was once in a situation like this. Our problem is that Guardian. However, I've never seen a monster of that variety before. No kidding. I can tell by looking that it's a Hydra. I've never heard of one with green scales before. Not just that, the thing can regenerate itself too. Hydras were a type of dragon, a lone wolf with multiple heads and unmatched strength. Apparently they inhabited some parts of the demon continent. There were 3 varieties of it, split up by color of scales: white, gray, and gold. There were no such things as Hydras with green scales. Go figure, they find the one that's not common knowledge. But now Roxy knows about it. Roxy's smart. I love freaking Roxy. She's so freaking smart. Again, she doesn't give herself enough credit. Everything they're really proposing here is coming from Roxy, and yes, technically Rudius in a minute. That's most likely a manatite Hydra. I've read about it in a book. It's an infernal dragon whose entire body is covered in magic stones, scales that absorb mana. It was spotted during the Second Great Human-Demon War. And according to the book, they were annihilated when the continent was split. I was sure that it was nothing more than a fairy tale, but it seems that it does exist. And I think this is why Roxy called a retreat. I think she realized this right here and said, we need to get the hell out of here. Are you saying that we won't be able to damage it at all? If what I've read is true, you should be able to hit it with your spells as long as you launch them at point blank range. Point blank range. It was huge, and it could carve you up like a cheese grater if it contacted you with its body. Putting his hand up directly against it would cost him all of his fingers. Still gonna revive itself even if you damage it. What are we supposed to do about that? Its ability to regenerate certainly is a nuisance. But the damn thing can't be invincible. It was surprising to them, but common knowledge to Rudius. He also knew that it wasn't invincible. Why? His knowledge from his previous life. So, he spoke up. I've heard that if you burn the stump of where it was cut off, it won't be able to regenerate. He recounted the tales of Hercules, who fought a Hydra using a torch to cauterize the wounds. While just a story to Rudius, the party's reaction was positive. So that's it, just burn the open wounds. We haven't brought any torches along, but it won't be able to reflect magic if we strike it where it's injured. Guess it's worth the shot. Rudius wasn't sure just how similar the Hydras of this world was to the story. The myth said that one head was immortal, but maybe it could be defeated by burning each head. He didn't want to be too optimistic, but it was a living creature. Living creatures could be killed. It wasn't guaranteed, but there was no such thing as a guaranteed success. Honestly, Rudius just felt it would be best to just go back to town and prepare more. Maybe hire more adventurers who could slice the Hydra's necks. But Paul wouldn't allow that. In his current state, he would probably just insist on challenging the beast himself. Plus, if they went back, there was no guarantee they would find somebody that would want to fight a Hydra, or they would find supplies that would aid them. They had a countermeasure, and the people, thus they would proceed to battle. Very interesting point. And again, this goes back to this is like a really broad theory that has kind of been building my mind for a long, long time, is one of the things that is never really hit on much with really any isekai series is why is the world they go to so similar to the ones that they find in their books? That's the whole thing. The opening chapter is always, I got isekai, and then I went, oh, it's a fantasy world. I'm an isekai. I read about this in my books. Can't wait to fight a dragon. It's never really hits on that question mark of, wait, this is sort of similar to this story, which I would assume is a fictional story. Then it brings up the question of, wait, are these stories fake? If the concept of summoning in this world that Rudius is in now, if the concept of summoning is to pull legendary monsters from other worlds to this world, what's to say that our whole history of fiction and writing isn't based on some sort of knowledge of people in our past having summoned these beasts, or them being present at some point and being summoned to this other world? It opens a massive, broader story concept that really does beg the question of, is this just another side, another world within these other worlds? that it's all tied together. It's not just him being teleported to a world that is just fictitious, built from fake stories, but they're all interlinked. What if Hercules fought a Hydra from this world? And he was a real historical person. But from Rudy's perspective, it's so interesting to get that mindset of, wait, do I trust that? I mean, everything fits. Why not? He's usually very hesitant about bringing that stuff over, especially since he's came here. Like, he's like, I have all this knowledge of roguelikes that I could totally apply here to this dungeon diving that we're doing, but I don't want to. I'm going to keep that to myself. I'll only offer advice when I see it, and I'll let them choose to use it or not. Now he's like, we don't really have a choice. Might as well try this because it sounds so similar. Geese turned to Paul. Hey, Paul, you fine with all this? Yeah, that's not much of an answer. You listening? You're the only one that could chop that thing's head off. Paul was the only one that could do the chopping. And with voiceless casting, Rudius was the only one that could cauterize it. But depending on the situation, Rudius may have to close the distance and do it from melee range. While he was attacking the stub of a neck, the surrounding scales may nullify his magic. In that case, he would have to have the others divert the attacks while he got closer. Roxy would heal them if he took damage. That is technically one of those terrifying things. This thing's massive. This thing is huge. And so this thing's gonna be thrashing around, and again, merely touching it harms you. It's like the old days, like way back at NES days, like whenever you touched any enemy, it would harm you, but it wouldn't harm them. It was always stupid. This is literally one of those cases where you literally have to dance around this stuff. And yes, Rudius is pretty fit. He has been keeping up on his physical training, but he doesn't have a battle aura. And if Elise is taking that much damage with a battle aura, what is he going to take? And yes, there's only so much healing could do. Paul expelled a breath and looked around to everyone. Elise, Talhan, Geese, and Roxy. You've all helped me up until now. Years have passed since the displacement incident. You crossed the demon continent for me, searched out Rudy in the Northern Territories for me, went to lengths I couldn't even begin to dream of. But now that's over. We'll either save her, or, assuming that she's not alive, at least all of my family will be accounted for. This is the end. Please, lend me your strength one last time. They nodded. It's not your style to act so humble, but I understand. I'll give this all I have. There's not an idiot here who would say no after coming this far. You sure have calmed down over the years. Well, not like I'll be much help, but I'll still do what I can. Let's win this. We'll be rewarded with our efforts once we claim victory. I do really like this part because yes, Paul has expressed this before. I mean, he said to Ellen Lace when she first got back, he is really appreciative of these guys. Really appreciative of everything they've kind of done this entire time. Again, I've kind of mentioned this several Mushoku Mondays ago, and this idea with Ellen Lace herself is like, how much stuff they're doing for him. Again, despite the fact that they kept saying how Paul's a dirtbag and everybody's angry and they all hate him, they'll never forgive him, they're doing a lot for him. Again, ever since the displacement, they've pretty much given up their life to help Paul. That's a crazy, crazy dedication to help somebody out. I can't even think of really any people in my life that would go that far out of their way to give up everything, their life, their families, and everything just to go on this path of trying to help somebody that they haven't been around in a long time. Again, it was sort of like the comment that Rudius made when they were all gathered together in the teleportation room at that 6-4. Everybody was here except for Ghislaine. And Ghislaine's the only one that I can necessarily see. But if you asked me from the beginning of the story, and you told me Ghislaine, Annalise, Talhan, Geese, they were all like former party members of Paul. And now everybody's going to get moved. Who do you think would actually help Paul out of this group of people? I would say Ghislaine. But it's so funny that Ghislaine's the only one that's not helping Paul throughout this whole period of time. Again, understanding why, because Ghislaine's focus was to find Edis and to find Rudius. She was basically tasked with protecting them. Paul tasked her with protecting Rudius. And yes, Philip and all them tasked her with protecting Edis. So that was her priority. And then once she found her, she moved on to Edis needs to train. Okay, let me go show her where she can train. But it's sort of sad in the idea that you wonder if she ever did see that. She knows. I would assume that she knows. Again, based on the fact that she was at the refugee camp, she would see that they were all missing. But it's kind of sad that she wasn't out there looking as well. She didn't take note of the message left behind by Paul. But Elise, Talhan, Geese, they never stopped looking. And yes, Roxy eventually joining them. I know why Roxy did it. She sees Paul, Zenith, and Lilia and Rudy as family. They brought her in and treat her like family. celebrated birthdays together with them. So it was a given that she would help. She wasn't going to look for Rudius. She even put Rudius at the bottom of the priority list because she knew that Lilia and Aisha and Norn, those are the ones that need the most help. Zenith was an adventurer. She could probably handle herself, but she was still a priority. Rudius was sort of the lower, again, because she knew that he would be safe. And now here, they're inside of one of the most dangerous labyrinths out there because of the teleportation traps. For what? For somebody else's wife. It shows how much they either care for these people or how selfless they are to help a friend. And it's, despite what comes up, it's great to see Paul acknowledge that. One last time. Paul was choking back tears. Rudy. Paul stammered, but Rudius can see the resolve in his eyes. You're a really reliable son. You can flatter me after we defeat the Hydra. It's not flattery. I really do mean it. I can't be as calm as you. I can't come up with ideas either. I'm just an idiot who runs in head first without thinking. His lips retching as if he was grinding his teeth together. I'm a terrible father. But even so, can't even set a good example to my son. His voice was thick with conviction. He was staring at Rudius, eyes so focused, it felt like he was glaring daggers at him. Determination. That was the word. Paul was full of determination. With that in mind, I'm gonna say this to you. I know this isn't something that parents should say, but I'm gonna say it anyways. All right, save your mother, even if it kills you. It's gonna start getting bad. This was a father talking to a son. It wasn't something a parent should say. It would be better if he said that he would save her even if it killed him. Still, Rudius didn't think he was a cruel father for saying that. This was his conviction and trust in Rudius. Paul intended what he said. He would save her even if it cost him his life. And he thought of Rudius as an equal. He believed in him, seen him as an adult. That's why he said what he did. Rudius had to respond. They were going to save Zenith. To that end. He and Paul would share the same determination. Rudius gave a sharp nod, and Paul returned it. Rudius thought he looked happy, though he couldn't be sure. With that, their rematch with the Hydra was about to begin. That is such a very interesting way of putting that. Paul is literally telling him, my son, save your mother, even if it kills you. But I sort of agree with Rudius's perspective here. It's the idea of viewing Rudius as an adult, but additionally saying, this is what I'm going to do. Do the same, but this is what I'm going to do. He's getting Rudius hyped up. He's getting Rudius built up. He's getting Rudius up on his feet and saying, this is what I'm going to do. Let's do it. Let's do it. It's almost like a self-hype. I don't necessarily, and yes, technically we get a sense of that with the next chapter, but I don't necessarily see it as Paul saying, go die for your mother. Not saying, like Rudius points out, he's not being cruel here. He's not saying, go die, son. I want my wife. Go save my wife. I think it's more him saying, again, partly a self-hype, but also, she's extremely important to me. She's extremely important to me. I'm going to save her no matter what. I also wonder if it's an aspect of Paul being cognitive of the threat he's facing. They just engaged this thing. And I wonder if there is an element of him understanding this thing is really, really strong. And I'm probably not going to survive. So maybe possibly this is sort of another way of him saying, I'm probably going to die. I need to make sure that my sacrifice isn't a waste and that Rudius carries on to finish the job. Again, acknowledging him as being this genius son. I am the useless father. I need him to pull this off. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be a failure like I always am. Rudius can make sure this happens. So even if I die, I want to make sure that he knows, finish the job. Finish it. I know you don't see her as a mother, but I need you to step up. I need this from you. It's almost like I trust you. It doesn't really go in line with the thought process here with Rudius, but I think that's possibly another aspect of it. Chapter 9. Mortal Kombat. I thought this was a joke. Stupid title. This is a stupid chapter title. I'm not joking. It's a stupid chapter title. Back in the room with the Hydra, Paul gave the command before crouching low to the ground and moving like the wind. This time, Annalise stuck behind him, and Talhan slow-legged afterwards. They matched his pace as they advanced. A lot more organized now. Geese held back, because he was useless in the fight. It was his duty to notify the others if they failed. Reaching the Hydra, it went on the attack. Paul moved quickly to slice through one net. That was Rudeus' cue to launch a fireball. It evaporated before it hit it. Guess I'll have to get up close and launch it directly. Rudeus sighed, knowing that he would have to now get into melee range to cauterize the stumps. Roxy spoke up. Just like we planned. Rudy, can you do it? I've got this. It's not like magic's the only thing that I've been practicing. He assured her, though his heart was hammering. He wasn't good in melee. All his memories were tainted with defeat. Paul, then Ghislaine, then Edis, finally Rigurd. Sure, he won against Linium, Persena, and Luke, and others using the Eye of Foresight, but could any of them defeat a Hydra? No. He didn't see how they could. Not when Paul and Annalise were struggling. It was illogical to think he could either. It's like that whole aspect of saying, yeah, I'm successful here, I've failed here, and these are failing this, so it's like it doesn't make any sense. Like, none of this is computing as being logical. But he wasn't alone. He had a team. He didn't know of the extent of Talhan's power, but if he was anything compared to the others, he would prove useful too. Rudeus rushed in behind Paul. Annalise on his right, Talhan on his left. Behind Rudeus was Roxy. It was an Imperial cross formation. The Hydra snapped towards them with its heads. It seemed that it didn't move more than 4 at a time, maybe because they would get in each other's way. Annalise parried one, Talhan deflected one, and Paul cut off the third. Quickly, Paul called to Rudeus, who launched flames at it, scorching the wound. Before Rudeus could confirm that it worked, the other heads came whirling at them. Paul blocked one, Annalise deflected the other with a shield. From the corner of his eye, Rudeus could see a spray of blood coming out from Talhan. Thankfully, Roxy quickly healed. Everyone was working to shield Rudeus from injury. As he verified their strategy, it looked like it was effective. It wasn't healing. After announcing its success, Paul gave off a cheer before chopping off another head. Rudeus burned it as the heat choked the air around them. Paul was dripping in sweat, but it was a necessary firepower for the strategy. Suddenly, Rudeus detected another attack with his Eye of Foresight, calling for cover. 2 heads coming his way. As Rudeus dodged one of them, Annalise planted herself between them, shoving her shield out. A drop of blood scattered across Rudeus' cheek as he called out for Roxy to heal. Following this, Roxy and Annalise returned to their original positions as if nothing happened. Paul announced that he would be going after the third target. A pillar of red blood sprayed in the air as a head crashed before Rudeus. Once again, he burnt the neck. Then the fourth. They could do this. But then, the Hydra's movements changed. The remaining 5 moved simultaneously, going after Talhan. He evaded the first one, but being unable to evade the second one, he dropped and rolled trying to escape. As soon as he did, scales clipped him and his heavy armor went flying. His butt was firmly on the ground by the time he blocked the third with his axe. But the fourth, he couldn't defend himself. It snapped at his feet. In a second, Talhan was suspended in midair. The fifth swooped in, jaws bared, threatening to snap his torso in 2 as he dangled helplessly. Then, a low boom resounded as the head hit the floor. The tragic fleshly stump of a dwarf's neck was nowhere to be found. It was the Hydra's head that had been lost, as Paul sawed it off. That was cheap. That was cheap. There's some times where I'm like, Refugian, we don't need a joke right here. Refugian, we don't need a fake out joke right here. Though it could be for the sake of lowering your guard for later. Roxy administered healing while Rudeus burned the Hydra again. 2 at the same time, only 3 left. Once again, the Hydra's movements changed, staggering back as if frightened of them. Paul called for them to press the attack, but Rudeus' legs were frozen. Wasn't this a trap? Again, it's one of those things of like, Rudeus is trying to like think of the situation rather than rushing in. But again, that could be an aspect of Paul's feeling of instincts. Like, he thinks that he can do this. Whenever these things flee, you go after them. You go on the offense. And yes, that's technically to Paul's preferred style, Sword God style. It's attack, attack, attack. His style isn't defensive. It's not to hang back. As Rudeus felt the enemy was scheming and that they shouldn't attack, the Hydra began chomping at the burnt stumps. Because they were cauterized, it was literally trying to remove that cauterization so it can heal. Annalise thrusted her gladius into one of the heads that was beginning to heal. She then unleashed an ice smash into it. As it had not regrown its scales, the ice burst right through the soft meat. She then called to Roxy, who unleashed Flamethrower. While the scales absorbed some of it, it still managed to sear the flesh. As Paul rushed to pursue, the Hydra didn't retreat. Instead, It lifted its enormous body, stretching its head just short of the ceiling, and glowered down at them. Was it afraid? No, that didn't seem likely. What was it? It felt similar. It felt familiar. Felt dangerous. It was drawing in air. Rudius knew what this meant. It's gonna breathe something. Everyone, come over to me, please. Paul retreated a step, returning to Rudius. Annalise and Talhan came running, almost tumbling, to the base of his feet. Roxy leapt towards Rudius, with her arms spread, as if to grab on. See this? Paul's like, okay, come back here. Talhan's like tumbling, getting over, and just falls at his feet. And then Roxy's like, just grab on. I don't know if they strategized this beforehand. They're just basically doing what Rudius is calling out to. But it kind of makes you wonder, was Roxy thinking that he was going to do like the whole earth pillar thing and push himself up in the air? I don't know if she's ever witnessed him doing that, or if maybe other people told her about stories of him doing that. Because he has used earth pillars to kind of push himself up a lot. So maybe she thought they were just going to lift them. He was just going to lift them up. She's like, I'm going to grab on. Rudius conjured a wall of water as thick as he could. Almost at the same instant, the creature exhaled a tremendous flame from the three heads. Enormous plumes of steam rolled out, heating the whole room. Dragon breath was renowned for its fearsome heat. It could melt right through steel, or evaporate a small bog in an instant. And just now, 3 heads were pouring out that very breath. That's a lot. That is a lot of flame. An ordinary magician alone couldn't defend against it. 5. No, not even 10 would be enough. Fortunately, Rudius' mana wasn't ordinary. So he's talking about the fact that he's expending a crap ton of mana to create this massive wall of water. This is something that normally expending from a normal mage would probably deplete them and create nothing much. He's creating a large mass with a large amount of mana. Afterwards, Rudius called for Paul to attack. The Hydra's breath had limited uses. Whether it was created by an organ or stored up mana, Rudius didn't know. He just knew that it couldn't fire it in rapid succession. This had to be its trump card. Something it could only unleash with 3 heads at the same time, probably to avoid catching the other ones in the path. So it's kind of indicating here that this is something it only does when it gets to this stage. It's almost like a boss in a game. You're getting it to this one point and that's where it enrages. And it's because it's lost all these other heads, now it has the room to just unleash. This was their chance. Paul ripped through another neck, and Rudius burnt it. Just 2 more to go. 1 thicker one, and 1 thinner one. The thicker one was probably its main head, and Rudius thought that he would probably keep that one for last. Rudius called for Paul to go for the thinner one. Annalise and Talhan dealt with the thicker one. As Paul cut the neck, Rudius seared it. They could do this, Rudius told himself. 1 left. They won this. Even if the final one was immortal, they could deal with it now that they had the other ones gone. It was then, as he was using magic to cauterize the second last stump, the Hydra's body trembled. He didn't know what that movement meant. He could see it with his eye of foresight, but he didn't understand it. The creature was just too big. Again, technically with the eye of foresight, it's showing these possibilities. And if it's this massive thing, like, what are you gonna see? You moron, wait! Before he realized what happened, Paul had slammed him out of the way. Something enormous came crashing down right in front of his eyes. But it didn't have its head anymore. No, there was no head. It was just its neck. The Hydra was slinging around its headless necks like spiked whips, all 8 of them. Every one of them coated in scales that could shred flesh. It was whipping those around all at once, mowing down anything in the vicinity. Rudy! Paul screamed, driving his foot into him to kick him out of the way. Almost simultaneously, a thud resounded as something smashed into the ground right where he was a moment ago, in the once empty space that existed between Paul and him. Horns jutted from the creature's forehead, and an eye glared down at Rudius. A panicked, cornered eye. One trying desperately to survive. The Hydra's eye. On instinct, Rudius plunged his left hand into the eye. He could hear it squish like a grape popping as a fierce heat consumed his arm. The Hydra blinked from pain, its scale-covered eyelids clamping down like a guillotine. In that instant, he launched a stone cannon blowing off the top of the Hydra's head. The force from the collision jerked his arm into the air. A terror, then a vicious snap that penetrated so deep in his ears, it seemed to claw its way to his brain. Choking back the pain, Rudius screamed out to Roxy, his trusted master. She unleashed a flamethrower, and the final head fell charred black from the fire. Its enormous body collapsed. Rudius could feel life gradually drain out of it. The final head was not immortal. They beat it. They won. At what cost? As Rudius celebrated, a sharp pain shot up his left hand. Looking down, he was in shock. It was gone. The eyelid had cut through the skin and muscle, snapping the bone apart. In the last moment when the Hydra raised its head, it ripped the whole thing off. Blood was pouring out. My hand. My left hand. It was in the eye. His hand was in the eye. Glancing over, the raw power of Roxy's fire magic left a clump of charcoal. The moment he saw that, he knew his left hand was gone. He could search for it, but he wouldn't find it. He would probably bleed out if he tried. Crap. He needed to heal fast. He casted Shine Healing, an advanced tier spell. Advance alone wouldn't restore what was lost, but he used it anyways. Pink flesh swelled over the amputated stump, ceasing the blood flow. The scratch on his face and the bruise from Paul's kick also healed. His breathing was erratic. Calm down, he told himself. His hand was gone, but the Hydra was an incredibly difficult foe. He got through it with everything but his left hand. It was a small price to pay. There's more cost. If Paul hadn't managed to squeeze in there and save him, he probably would have died. You really saved me there, Father. He glanced over his shoulder, searching for him, but there was no response. Everyone was quiet. Annalise just stood there. Talhan was silent. Roxy pursed her lips. And behind them, Geese. Geese was pale as a sheet. Paul gave no reply. Father? They were looking at something. He followed their gaze to Paul, collapsed on the ground, on his back. He wasn't just collapsed. He was unconscious. His eyes were vacant. His eyes were vacant, and his lower body was missing. I hate this stuff because I see my own dad. This is all I knew. I wasn't going to get through this. His eyes were vacant, and his lower body was missing. Rudius's brain couldn't process it. Wait, he knew what happened. That's right. He's seen it himself. Paul kicked him out of the way because the last head was coming down on that spot. He kicked him as hard as he could to move him. Rudius wasn't a child anymore, so he had to thrust his lower body forward enough to have power. Normally that kind of kick would send a person reeling back from recoil. But Paul was a swordsman, a skilled one. One that could wrap themselves in battle aura, one with physical strength. So when he kicked Rudius, his body didn't move. That meant that place he was at, the place, no, he didn't want to understand. But why? The moment he strangled out those words, Paul's eyes moved. Landing on him, Rudius met his gaze. Paul said nothing. His mouth just softened, as if relaxed, as if expelling a sigh of relief and blood. Oh, I hate connecting this. I can't even read. I can't read the line. I'm gonna have to take a break. You were all excited about this stupid chapter in this volume. You were all excited about this stupid volume. And what sucks is the stuff with Zenith in the next chapter is going to get me too, for a different reason. And blood gurgled up past his lips. Then the light went out in his eyes. Paul was dead. That is chapter 9. Yeah, it's been flagging this for a long time. Not that I think that Refugian is... A lot of characters get flagged. Let's be perfectly honest. You can see a flag in really anything. If anybody says, I'll talk to you later, it's flag. But I think the thing that sucks the most is that this is technically something that I've been assuming this is going to happen for other reasons. I was going to show this, but then I'm realizing probably spoilers for haven't seen it, but that's volume 13. I seen this cover before when I was buying all the volumes that I hadn't had yet. I bought that one, and I seen the cover, and I'm like, that's weird that Paul's not there. Yes, the other spoiler that I seen there is that obviously they're going to find Zenith. That didn't bother me. I was assuming they were going to find Zenith. There wouldn't be too much emphasis put on this idea of let's go get Zenith if they don't get Zenith. But I mean, there's a chance they just find a body. But the problem with that was that Paul wasn't in the picture. And I wanted to not think about it. If anybody has ever talked to me over the years that I've talked to about my progress and stuff, I've mentioned to quite a few people that I seen something on a cover. This is whenever I be very careful when I order volumes. I have this system of like not looking at the page and then clicking buy or forcing my eyes to take the glasses off so that I don't see anything. I have a system for buying these volumes because that happened. And I didn't want to think about it. I told most people I seen something on a cover once and I didn't want to think about it. And that was it. So I had a feeling. But there was a side of me that was going, you know what, don't overthink it. Maybe possibly Paul's somewhere else. Maybe Paul is, I don't know, maybe he's in service of Ariel at that time of that book. You know, I don't know. So I kind of had a feeling that this was coming. The problem is that it doesn't change it. I mean, that's the sign of, fuck. That's a sign of good writing, that despite that, it still hurt. That line hurt. Paul was dead. And like I said, it's personal for me because it's hard to, especially to read. Like, it's a little bit easier when I'm watching an anime. It's hard to read because what do you do when you're reading? When you're reading, you're imagining all this stuff. I'm imagining these headless stumps just flinging around. I'm imagining it hitting somebody and armor shredding off. I'm imagining all this stuff. Even when I was talking about the whole fire breathing parts like that, I can imagine Roxy running up there and just like a little child wrapping her arms around him. I can imagine all that stuff. And what happens when I read that last part is, like I said, I imagine my own father and seeing the life leave. There's nothing more painful than seeing the life leave somebody. No, I didn't see blood gargle up in his mouth. It's the eyes. That's what hurts. Or in the later moments, seeing the smile that they're happy. Paul was happy. His son lived. Despite the fact that, again, earlier, it sort of gives an indication that Paul is telling him, go in there and die for your mother. He wanted his son to live. He was still protecting his son. Even though just before then, he's thinking to himself, why doesn't my son see my wife as his mother? Why is he not upset like I am? Still, it's his son. He protected his son. And I know that just what Ruius is, I think this is going to be, I have dabbled in the chapter 10, and I'm already really kind of curious of what kind of effect this will have on Rudius. I mean, me personally, I know the effects of losing a father, the effects of losing somebody, but it's so much different in this story because the relationship that Rudius has with Paul. What effect is this going to... I think this is going to literally be the biggest change in Rudius. If there isn't a significant change for Rudius because of this, I'd be shocked. Because what he just experiences, it's similar to with the whole situation with Zenoba. It's that realization point of somebody sacrificing their life for you. It was a little different with Zenoba because he's a blessed child. I mean, it's similar to Paul as well. Paul is a swordsman, a very skilled swordsman. But he replaced Rudius. He said, move. And put himself in his place. He couldn't do anything else. To get Rudius out of the way of that thing, he had to push him. He had to get in where he was at. And the other aspect of this that I think is going to affect Rudius a lot, I can't even think anymore, is the fact that it went out of its way to point out that Rudius chose that head Why did it go out of its way to go, there's two heads left. One's a thin one, and one's a thick one. Get the thin one first. Which one kills Paul? The thick one. What if he had... I know this is going to happen. Rudius does this all the time. What if I told him to take out the thicker one first? Would Paul still be alive? What if I chose the other one? Would Paul still be alive? I know he's going to be stuck in turmoil. He's going to blame himself, obviously. He's going to be constantly going, what if I did this? What if I didn't tell them about how to kill this thing? We could have left, and he would still been alive. He's going to go through... I just have a feeling he's going to go through every single scenario, and it's going to destroy him internally. But at the same time, I'm wondering, and I kind of assume it with what the name of the next chapter is, Parents. I'm assuming at some point the growth is going to come in that he's going to realize my father saved my life. Why would he do that? Paul didn't see me as a son. I was the last on his list. Remember the list? Everybody else, and then me. I'm always at the bottom. Paul doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about my well-being. I'm the last. He probably doesn't even see me as a son. I barely see him as a father. Now he does, because he made the ultimate sacrifice for me. Nobody would do that. I'm a stranger to Paul. I'm a nobody from another world. He's going to risk his life for me. He just did. I need to take a break, but I'm really curious as to how that changes his state of mind as to how he sees people around him. And again, I'm not ignoring the fact that he has significantly changed how he views so many people. I mean, technically with Aisha and Norn, they are his sisters. He literally was going to destroy a classroom over Norn. He fought a kingdom for Aisha, technically, and Lilia. He goes through a lot for people. He does acknowledge that people are people. He's not like Nanahoshi claimed to be, where she said, I don't feel any of this is real. He realized this is real. He realizes his new life. He wants this new life. He likes this new life. Otherwise, he'd go back with Nanahoshi. But I think this is going to solidify more than just people, family. If any point beyond this, once he's going to go through his turmoil and correct his path, if he doesn't see his family as family anymore, I'd lose a lot of respect for him. Now, if Refugin goes that direction, he's probably going to have a reason for it, and I'm going to expect there's going to be a reason for it, but I would expect that Rudius would change a lot with this experience. I don't want to get into it, but I think the thing that's going to make this even hurt me more, and I'm not going to do chapter 10, I'm sorry. I need to rest. What hurts more is, and I'm hoping that eventually it changes, but just kind of, there's a victory dance here. And it's so short-lived. There is an element of like, what was the point of this? I really do wonder if there's going to become a question mark of, was this worth this? They literally did a trade-off. They traded Paul's life for Zenith. And there is a broken element that's going to come up about Zenith itself, and it's going to really beg that question. It was like, it sucked so much that I read this, and I immediately wanted to continue on. I was like, I read that, it hurt so much, but I pushed to go into chapter 10, because I wanted something to show me a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, there is, Refugin, you're going to give us a don't worry, because this, cheer up. No, Refugin doesn't let up. He doesn't let up, because, like, the following realization is like, oh, this sucks. And like I said, it's for two different reasons. Paul and Zenith's situation right here is two big blows to me. Two massive, again, personal blows to me that just, I'm like, this is going to take a while to get through, honestly. But we'll see. We'll see. I think the thing that hurts the most about losing Paul right now is there's so much undone. And I think that I guess I'm so used to a lot of other storylines where if there is some sort of death, there's like this big moment before the death, and they get to say what they wanted to say, and things are clarified. They make up or whatever. Now, granted, Rudius has had a lot of good moments with Paul to really clarify, to really clear things up, and to fix their relationship. Again, with Volume 5, it's literally just havoc in what non-existing relationship they have, and building one, and then seeing how that reflects in their second meeting about how well they handle it. It shows you their relationship has changed. But I hate the fact that you had this outburst just before they went back in there. Paul does look to him and say, look, spare, give your life for Zenith. Again, seeing him equal. But at the same time, there was all the stuff before it that is like unresolved. That, again, like I said, that mindset that's in the back of Paul's head that goes, why are you the way you are? It does make you hurt. That was never cleared up. And yes, they keep saying it, and that's the flagging stuff is, oh, well, we'll handle it when we get back to the end. We'll clear things up back at home. Like, yeah, okay, I got flag enough. It sucks that it's never clarified. You don't even have that last minute, like, conversation where Paul is, struggling to survive, and he's sitting there going, Rudius, I have to tell you one last thing. And you go, no, don't say anything. And you get those last words. Don't even get that. It's so brutal that you don't even get that. We get no final words. Just pretty much a relief. And again, I think that relief was, my son's okay. He did survive. I did save him. He's okay. My brilliant son. Not me. Failure of a father. I'm useless. My son is so much more incredible than me. He's so calm. His calmness is a sign that my son is so much stronger than me. But it's not even true. But he sees that in Rudius. And so he's happy that his son, who's not a failure father, who's not going to be a failure father when his son comes out. That sucks. He's not going to see his grandson. His failure father saved his useful son to save his genius son. And again, that's another one of those things where I'm wondering how heavy he's going to get into that subject. I'm just a NEET from another world. And I just costed somebody their life. Oh, there's so much stuff they can get into with this death. And it sucks that a death has to trigger that. I guess there also is the subject about Rudius's hand. We'll see. Let's see if... I don't know. I think he's right-handed. I'm sorry. I wanted to light it up in a little bit. I'm lightening up for myself. Obviously, I would show you my legs, but then, of course, people would screenshot it, and I would never hear the end of it. I have all my limbs, but I could not imagine, like, the idea of losing a limb. Like, ghost itches and whatever. What they call them, ghost itches or whatever. This idea of, like, losing a limb and how that would feel, like, not having it there. I mean, you kind of get that sense if, like, your arm falls asleep, you almost have that sense of, like, I'm feeling like I'm moving it this way, but it's not moving that way. I could not imagine what that would feel like to lose that. One, the pain, obviously, but two, this is the aspect of it's gone. Where is it at? This is my hand. I use it a lot. Why? It's no longer there. I just couldn't imagine the idea of losing ice. But to his point, makes perfect sense. This was a very tough foe. If that was all they lost, it was an okay cost. But it wasn't all they lost. And yes, like I said before, I hated the Talhan joke in there. I'm not critical of Refugin often, but to have that in there was just, that was cheesy. I'm sorry. I will admit when Refugin disappoints me, and the Talhan thing dying in the middle was super cheesy. That shouldn't have been there. It was a very dumb fake out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But again, I'm assuming the reason why Refugin did that was to make you drop your guard. Oh, somebody's gonna die. Oh, they didn't die. Okay, well then they're gonna be fine. They wouldn't fake out twice. No, Paul was dead. But anyways, this is, like I said, it's probably gonna be a short Mushoku Mondays. I apologize, but like I said, it's This was super rough. I'm exhausted right now. Holding back stuff, it wears me out. Just need to take a rest. I'm sure most people are fine with that, but anyways, depressing note to leave it on, but we will. I don't think it's like one of those things where I'm like, I could probably go in the next chapter, but I'm seeing that one's going to be depressed too. So I think the next few Mushoku Mondays are just going to be depressing. So I don't know how I'm going to handle chapter 10 either, but we'll see how as we go along. But thank you guys for dropping by. I hope you guys enjoyed, despite this, enjoy this Mushoku Mondays. As always, I greatly appreciate everybody for dropping by. Chat, hey chat. I'm sure you're giving me moral support, and I appreciate the moral support. But yeah, thanks everybody for that support. I can't talk anymore. Thanks to everybody for their supporting the channel itself, for your likes, your sharing out, your kind words, and yes, greatly appreciate everybody that supports the channel through Patreon, tips link, super thanks, memberships, all that kind of stuff. It's all that stuff together that makes this possible, and I greatly appreciate it. It means so much to me. You guys mean the world to me. I love you guys. I feel like saying that right now. I love you guys. And until the next Mushoku Mondays, okay, y'all take care. I was afraid I had the 13 up. Y'all take care. I would have been so mad if I didn't hit record, because I was not going to re-record that. Oh. Yeah. He thought that was. He thought about. Yes, he thought that. Yes, he thought that they were. Yes, he thought that they were. Yes, he thought that it was a forbid. I can be a bit of a coward. From afar, Rudius could glimpse a twink. From afar, Rudius could glimpse the twink. From afar, Rudius could glimpse the twinkle of its emerald green scales. From afar, Rudius could glimpse. As well as its short, stout body and numerous heads, as well as its damn you moron, taking advantage of the centrifugal, An explosion rippled a dense smoke. But being unable to. Why? But the damn thing can't be invincible. Still. No. Still. If we're gonna revive it, if it's gonna revive itself every time you damage it, what are we supposed to do about that? If we're gonna even damage that thing, if it's gonna revive itself every time we damage that thing, what are we supposed to do about that? I'm just not pulling off the Talhan voice right now. It's not in the throat.